So, good afternoon, unless you're someplace where it's a different part of the day, then I hope that's going well for you. My name is Elise Gittleman on behalf of Natural Dharma Fellowship. Just want to welcome everybody to our Monday night meditation. We're very happy to have Dean Slider here to wrap up the four-part series on Buddha Dharma and the stories of J.D. Salinger, with the last story in 9 stories, Teddy. I'm going to do a quick tech talk, which probably most of you know, but it's part of my job. And just during the presentation, I will have Dean highlighted. If for any reason you'd rather see gallery view and see everybody, you can click in the upper right-hand corner. There should be a little set of dots that will turn it back into the Hollywood Squares version. You can turn on subtitles using the closed caption button at the bottom. And if somebody else turns them on and you don't want to see them, you can also turn them off if you don't get tired of them. Unless Dean otherwise asks you to put something in the chat is really for technical issues. The sound isn't good. I'm not seeing Dean anymore. Whatever. So you can chat directly to me, the host, and I will get back to you and see if I can help you out. During discussion time, you can use the raise hand on your hand. You can use the raise hand on the screen. Dean seems pretty comfortable with people just speaking up, so that's however it works for folks. Please unmute yourself, and then when you're done with your turn, mute yourself again. If for some reason you have a comment or a question and it doesn't work for you to speak it today, you can put it in the chat to me and I'm happy to share it with the group. And if you don't want attribution, you prefer to be anonymous, I'm happy to do that as well. And just a reminder that because this event is being recorded, when you speak, you're giving us permission to use what you say in the recording and we can't edit that out afterwards. And that's all I get to do. And I'm going to stop and turn it back over to Dean.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome or welcome back. Great to have you here. So let's start by sitting comfortably. Just kind of smooch the body around a little bit, loosen it up. Maybe take a long, deep breath in through the nose. Retain it for a few moments. And release through the mouth in a deep sigh. And again. And again. And now what if, whoops, oh, the meditation bus left without us. We were late for the bus. We're just here in the bus shelter sitting on the bench. Everyone else is going to be heading for nirvana or, exercising their mad meditation skills. We're just going to sit here on the bench. Not go anywhere. Being right where we are. And rather than going to some whatever spiritual Disneyland of enlightenment we may have imagined, we may have conjured up out of our reading or training. Instead, we'll say right here. Benched. And rather than go somewhere, just be with whatever experience presents itself. Just flopping onto the bench, flopping wide open. So that whatever sounds present themselves, whatever sensations, thoughts, emotions, the whole 360-degree display of present experience, unpremeditated, unpremeditated experience. Whatever presents itself, we just marinate in that. Without favoring any particular part of it, without bias against any particular part of it. Just natural, innocent, wide openness. Just present awareness as it presents. No doing, just being with however things already are. We're one moment too late to change the present, and it's always the present. So we just happily give up all our plans, all our effort. And go on permanent vacation, accepting the present without clinging, without resistance. And take a couple of minutes before slowly opening the eyes. Okay, how's everybody doing? Good, good. Um, Before we get to the Salinger, I know that this natural, non-trying, non-dual approach to meditation is very familiar to some of you. Some of you, I don't know, it might be new to. So I just want to take a moment if there's any questions about that, about this approach to meditation. No? Okay, good. Nothing to it. That's the teaching, nothing to it. Just every time you start feeling yourself prompted, tempted to do something, just no, nah. You just drop that. Have a good laugh. And funnily enough. Okay, so we are on our last installment of the series, the last story in the book, Teddy, this incredible story. Um, and if after you're done with this, if you have, as I hope, fallen in love or refallen in love with Salinger, uh, I hope you'll go on to uh, the next book, Franny and Zooey, where he further the you may see it with different covers, but this is where we get the further adventures of the Glass family, and we get deeper into you notice, of course, I mean, the very first most remarkable thing about Teddy is this is the place where for the first time the Dharma teachings become explicit. Before this they were all covert, they were all implicit. Now they're right on the surface, and we'll talk about that. And this is as Salinger himself was now taking uh, taking classes at the Vedanta Society in New York, a couple of blocks from the house where he grew up, actually, and became good friends with the Swami there, Swami Nikhilananda. They they actually had a long correspondence. There's letters between them where Salinger bemoans his slow progress toward enlightenment, um, kind of like the rest of us. So Franny and Zooey is the next must read, and then after that, I don't have a copy here, but after that, is one more book called "Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenters" and "Seymour: An Introduction." Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenters and Seymour: An Introduction, and it's great. Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenters is about Seymour's wedding day, um, where he never makes it to the wedding, of course, because it's Seymour. Um, and then one more that's not available in a book, um, but there was piece of one more installment in the Glass family saga that was first published, like most of these, in the New Yorker. And you can find it if you go online and go into the New Yorker archives. It's in December 1965. It's called Hapworth 16 1924. I think I have those numbers right. But definitely some Hapworth, I think 16 1924. And the whole thing is about a 75-page long letter home from summer camp that Seymour wrote when he was 13 years old. It's fantastic. For some people, they feel it was wise of him never to put it in a book because they feel that that's where Salinger just got too far out. Um, for some of us, uh, as Dr. Hunter S. Thompson once wrote, it never got weird enough for me. Okay. And actually, some people say that about Seymour in Introduction, that, wait a minute, he's gone so far beyond the usual strictures of narrative fiction that we can't follow, we can't go there with him, but I'm delighted to go there with him. Okay. Oh, and most of you are aware, well, I'm plugging books. I think most of you are aware of my book, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature. I've got a chapter on Salinger here, and then the same kind of thing we've been doing here with Salinger, I do with Shakespeare, Emily Dickinson, Emerson and Thoreau, Dr. Seuss. I have a lot of fun in this one. And if you read that one, and one other you might want to take a look at is my book, Cinema Nirvana, Enlightenment Lessons from the Movies, where I do give a similar treatment to, oh, Casablanca, The Godfather, The Graduate, um, 15, Jaws, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's a lot of fun. I think it's a lot. I had a lot of fun writing it. Okay, Teddy. How'd you like Teddy? Perry, you loved it? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, great. Yeah. Yeah, it's just really wonderful. Teddy is the name, always first thing I look at with Salinger is the names, and with many writers is the names. Teddy, of course, is a nickname for Theodore, which means gift of God. And he is the inverted version of that is the feminine is Dorothy, as in the Wizard of Oz, gift of God. Hapworth 15, 1924. Thank you, Elise. Is that right?
I'll double.
Okay. Okay. The people will find it close enough. Um, yeah. So Teddy, um, what's going on here? What's going on here? Let's look at the very beginning. Let's begin at the beginning. There, there's a line in um, Alice in Wonderland or Through the Looking Glass. Begin at the beginning. Keep going till you get to the end, then stop. So let's do that. Begin at the beginning. I'll exquisite day you, buddy, if you don't get down off that bag this minute, and I mean it. Okay, these mean words from Teddy's father, who we soon learn plays. He's a third-rate leading man in radio serials. This is written in the early 50s, 1952. Um, um, I'm just old enough as a little kid. I can remember when it was shortly before TV took over, and they had all these shows, these serials, and romances and adventures, The Shadow, and so forth. Um, some that later became TV shows like Amos and Andy and so forth. And there was a lot of work for dramatic actors on the radio. So he's got this radio voice, which he uses in this case. He's pulling out all the right, his narcissistically deep and resonant voice, um, which now he's using to face down his little boy. So what? So we're this story starting, as they say, in medias res, in the middle of things. Clearly, something has happened just before this. What has happened just before this? All right. I'll exquisite day you, buddy, if you don't get down off this bag. So what has happened just before this? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, Laura?
Eddie climbed up on his father's suitcase and stuck his head out the portal.
Yep. And said,
It's an exquisite day.
yes, it's an exquisite day. Right. So that's our introduction to Teddy, but we never get to hear it. Right? It happens in the invisible realm, the inaudible realm, just before the story begins. Right? just as that the very first story, Seymour's death, happens in that invisible, inaudible realm just after the story ends. So actually, we have to begin slightly before the beginning, and keep going a little bit after the end. All right. So this is the very first thing we find out about implicitly about Teddy. This is what he sees. He looks around, he says, and it's an exquisite day. This pure appreciation of the beauty of life. All right. And then the very next thing we see is who it's getting wasted on, right? How it's wasted on his family, the inhospitable soil that this lovely, human being has been planted in. This is what Jesus calls casting your pearls before swine, right? And he says, and don't cast your pearls before swine because they'll trample them, and that's exactly what happens. Interesting dynamics, but how are the parents getting along with each other? Yeah, nicht sehr gut, not so good, right? I mean, you got to love the father, who's upset because Teddy's climbed up on his nice new Gladstone bag, and the mom saying, "Jump up and down on Daddy's bag, crush Daddy's bag." And the very last thing she says to Teddy, give mommy a great big kiss as he's leaving the stateroom. And what's his reply? Does he do that? No, not now. I'm too tired. Teddy's tired. Why is he tired? Yeah, why is he tired? Yeah, Perry.
He's going to the gym already, for one thing. He's
Yeah,
already been to the gym with Sven.
yeah,
And, I'm speculating that these people don't get him. So no
no,
matter what he puts out,
yeah,
they're never understanding him. He's
yeah, and that's tiring. Any bigger picture than okay, he's been to the gym. Yeah, Laura.
Because his family is emotionally exhausting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Many of us have been there. Yeah, yeah. Uh, and I think there's something else, bigger picture. We step back, bigger picture, that I'm tired.
This is
I
because he's such an old soul.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, you
I-
find that out later when he says, I've been here 1,000 times.
Yes, it's being foreshadowed here. You have to, most of these stories, when you get to the end, you have to go back and reread again and see how the ending is actually telegraphed on virtually every page. Seymour's suicide is telegraphed on virtually every page of Banana Fish. Right. So yeah, I'm tired. He's been here for thousands and thousands of lifetimes, dealing with these humans and doing his best to kind of, help them along. But man, the rest of us are slow. Yeah, David.
So not to jump to the end, but because we know what happens at the end, when people die, there's a replay of their last words with one another. And this would be really hard on this family to remember this conversation, possibly. It's an exquisite day. It's an exquisite day. And
Right.
there's the bickering.
All that bickering, that's the last interaction we had with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's be actually, David, since you've raised this, make sure that everyone is clear about what
Yeah.
happens at the end.
Yeah, just thought
Because
of that.
when I used to teach this in high school, the kids would come in and not just the kids. There was about maybe about a dozen years ago or so, there was a piece in the New Yorker, in the very same magazine where most of these stories first saw the light of day, this kind of, revisionist look at Salinger that was very critical.
Mm.
And it really pissed me off. And in particular, the in particular, the author of this article did not understand. He exactly misinterpreted the ending of Teddy. So what happened? Let's make sure we're clear. What happens at the end of Teddy?
He
What
ends
he
up
said
wrong.
came true.
Yeah.
What he
Yes.
foreshadowed said came true.
Yes.
He knew.
What he predicted, just as he's able to predict, at least as probabilities, the deaths of other people, why not his own?
Yeah.
Why not his own? Right? Because I would always get some students coming in thinking, oh, Teddy pushed Booper into the pool.
Oh, no.
And that, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that what you're hearing is her screaming. But when you get pushed into a swimming pool and crack your head open and die, you don't have time to scream. If you push your brother in to the empty pool and he cracks his head open, and then you see what you've done, then you scream. And it's a female voice that's echoing off the acoustical tiles. Right.
Can I ask one thing about that?
Yeah.
When now I've forgotten his name, the guy,
Yeah.
Northrop
Nicholson.
Nicholson,
Yeah.
comes down the hall because he doesn't really know where he's going, and there's somebody sitting on a chair
Yeah.
by the pool area. It isn't like she says there's no water in the pool or anything. She's just
No.
like, he just goes by her. I mean,
No.
what is she doing there? What's the point of her?
The point is to slow down the tempo of it. The ending. Thank you for bringing this up. Salinger loved movies. He loved TV. He was a big fan, I think, of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which was on TV a little bit later. Watched Hitchcock films and Marx Brothers films and so forth. And this is very cinematic.
Yes, the tension on the
Yes.
chair. I
Build,
gotta go. No, one more question. I gotta go. One more question. So I'm already nervous.
Yes. Yeah, you totally got it. And and it's completely Hitchcockian technique there.
Right.
There's some
You don't see anything, you just feel it. You
right,
just
right,
know.
right. Building that tension, building the suspense. And if we were just telling this in a straightforward way, we could say in one sentence, Nicholson had trouble. Nicholson went to one deck after another, was unsure where to find it. But no, what Salinger does instead is put us emotionally into Nicholson's shoes. Let us experience the frustration, make it feel as if Hemingway also is famous for this, making it feel as if as if reading about the action takes the same amount of time as the action itself. It doesn't really, but it's a very effective illusion, right? This is the last bottom of the second to last page. Using the forward ship stairway, he descended fairly briskly to the prom. Actually, look before that. After Teddy, who keeps saying, "No, I've got to go." Nicholson keeps saying, "But wait, but what about this? What would you do with the education system?" And so forth. And then after, finally, Teddy, and I want to get back to this, why it's so important to Teddy to get to the swimming lesson in the empty pool. Why it's so important. We'll come back to that. So finally, Teddy says, "Goodbye, I have to go." Nicholson sat motionless, and I'm on the second to last page here. Nicholson sat motionless for some few minutes after he left, his hands on the armrests of the chair, his unlighted cigarette still between the fingers of his left hand. As always, Salinger uses smoke, cigarettes, ashtrays, matches. We see this at the very beginning with the parents, that whole toxic, filthy relationship between them expressed in the filthy father's filthy flicking the ashes in the general direction of the nightstand, and they get on the floor and Teddy comes along and carefully cleans them up. right? He's cleaning up behind his parents' mess, physically as well as emotionally and spiritually, right? He's there in service, right? The Bodhisattva is there in service. As the Dalai Lama said, the Bodhisattvas never get a vacation. No wonder Teddy's tired, right? But now Nicholson sits there with his cigarette unlit in his hand for some few minutes. Why does he not yet light the cigarette?
Because he's lost in thought.
Yes,
He's
yes.
like,
He's thinking, he's trying to digest everything that he's heard, right? And then something else happens in Nicholson's mental process, something that's not spelled out because it's more effective to show it cinematically, right? Finally, he raised his right hand and used it as if to check whether his collar was still open. You know, that's a kind of, oh, where am I gesture. Kind of coming back to, he was lost in all the things Teddy was saying, and now back to the situation of the present moment. Finally, then he lit his cigarette and sat quite still again. He smoked the cigarette down to its end, then abruptly, keyword, abruptly let one foot over the side of the chair, stepped on the cigarette, got to his feet, and made his way rather quickly out of the aisle. What has happened in his mental process here that suddenly, after just sitting, thinking, smoking, abruptly, quickly, he's moving? What has happened in his mental process? Yeah, Laura?
He realized that Teddy just predicted his own death.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For all Nicholson's skepticism, he's realizing, well, wait a minute. What if? What is everything I've heard from this kid? What does this add up to? What if the kid really has these abilities that I've been so skeptical? You know, Nicholson's there as the straight man, right? But now, like, oh, what if? And like, you know, there's just enough of that possibility that, wait, I got to stop things. I got to stop things. And you see how effective it is to not spell any of this out. See, my job as a teacher here is to ruin everything by making it explicit. Salinger's job as the writer is to load it all in there, to show it, not tell it.
Does it have any element of also Nicholson being an apple eater, trying to have control over it? Like, I could do something about this. I'll go stop this thing. It's
Yeah.
gonna
Mm-hmm.
happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
he's suddenly like, I gotta be there now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not just he's gonna find out later. It's like he's trying to get downstairs to the pool.
Yeah. 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 You could say that. Yeah. As an apple eater, that would be the reason, the rational thing to do, the logical thing to do. I mean,
Yeah.
to be fair, it's probably the thing that any of us would do. You know, we'd
If it
want to,
suddenly dawned on you, you would
yeah,
try to be the one who was the hero
sure,
and
sure.
change history and do something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, keep this wonderful, charming, lovely 10-year-old enlightened sage, keep him around and keep him in the world.
so
Any
there
time.
are these many nirvana moments, and this is one of those. It's like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah. 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 It's I don't know if I'd say nirvana, I'd say an epiphany moment.
Well,
For sure.
in terms of mind blowing, they're like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
there's more going on here than I thought.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Right. Hang on one second. I just need to open a window here. By the way, it's an exquisite day in Santa Monica. Why is Teddy so determined to get to that swimming lesson on time? Why is he so determined to get to No, actually, before, yeah, okay, let's keep going with that. Why is he so determined?
Because he's tired.
Yeah, he's tired. He's tired.
And he's been here
Because he
before.
promised his sister he'd meet her and he's
Yeah,
late.
yeah. You know, there's a word that's become very meaningful to me in recent years, um, which is appropriateness. I'm getting a thing that's becoming more and more clear to me and more of value to me is there's a certain appropriateness to what happens, to the way the karma unfolds. A kind of a the kind of glib, um, somewhat inaccurate version of that would be that you hear people say, "Well, everything happens for a reason," right? Um, I'm not quite fond of putting it that way. For one, it's too simplistic. It's because that sounds like, oh, this thing happened for, like, each thing happens for, there's a one-to-one correspondence. The thing X happens because of to fulfill the X prime, and Y happens to fulfill Y prime. And we're smart enough to be able to make all those connections. Uh, and we ain't. It's much, as the Bhagavad Gita says, unfathomable are the ways of karma. Unfathomable are the waves of karma, though. It is all chains of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, but they are so complex and so subtle that for us to say, oh, this happened, you had to meet this person, so this could, I think it's too simple-minded. But having said that, um, you can't figure it all out with the rational mind. This happened for this reason. But the more you get tuned into it, the more you get a sense of the appropriateness, that there's a rightness to this. There's a rightness to that. And not only of all the things happening, but my role in them. Yeah, this is where I belong now. I belong sitting in this room, having this conversation right now with this breeze coming through the window. There's a rightness to it. Yes, Kay.
Do you think that Hetty had the intention of going with the causes and conditions and because this is like the notion of fate, which is not a Buddhist.
Yeah.
So he would have known and was fine with going, which
Yeah.
leads me to suspect, it's like, I'm 10 years old. Do I have to go through 10 more years of this crap or just let this happen with an insane sister, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. I like the way you put it in Buddhist terms, going with the causes and conditions. Yeah. I think that's another way of saying what I'm trying to get at with this notion of appropriateness. You know, I'm not gonna try to push against the river.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nancy?
Well, I was just rereading his last diary entry before the
Yes.
guy shows up. And the last thing he says is, it will either happen today or February 14th, 1958, when I am 16. It is ridiculous to mention even.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. That was the next thing I was going to go to. That is, and it was like every time I taught this story, it was so delightful to go back to that because all my students had missed that, right? So they're exactly as he says to Nicholson. I'm not saying this will happen on this date, but there's certain times where there are these, these probabilities, right? He's got it, as far as his death is concerned, he's got it down to 2. Now, for someone, 10-year-old boy or anyone to really have that ability to see his or her imminent death even narrowed down to two possibilities. That's pretty darn good. We'd be impressed. We'd say, that's amazing. We'd say, this is an extraordinary being. But what's really extraordinary, what's much more extraordinary, is that very last line, which in fact is the last thing that he writes in this life. The very last thing he writes. It is ridiculous to mention even. I mean, if I used my great advanced psychic powers and figured out that you're gonna die unless today, and come knocking at your door, David, I'm so glad I got here in time. The killers are on their way to your house. And you say, oh, Dean, okay, thanks so much for making the effort, but it's ridiculous to mention even. Right? That's a more advanced yogi than most of us are. Right? That's someone who really has got life is fine, death is fine. It's an exquisite day. I can enjoy an exquisite day. I can enjoy no more days. It's all good. Yeah, Perry?
I went through this a little bit reading this, which I reread because I thought it was so rich. He talks about not having emotion, how ridiculous poets are because they're all wrapped up in whether the weather means something or whatever. So this is that emotionless state. It's just, it is. Whatever is.
Yeah.
And that gives you that calm. It's like nothing you can do about it. Don't worry about it and don't have any emotion about it. On the other hand, he does appreciate certain things, like it's an exquisite day. He does have emotion. That's emotive, isn't it? To appreciate, to feel moved by something.
You can
Or is that just like gratitude?
Well, gratitude, we could say, is an emotion, but prior to that, what happens in your experience before the gratitude? Can you see you can just have a pure perception of beauty, whether it's the beauty of an exquisite day or the beauty of an exquisite movie or your grandchild's smile or whatever it is, and that has it's a perception. And then as a result of that, and so close on the heels of it that we might blur them together and consider it one thing, there would be the emotional response to that perception.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. Having said that, and thank you for bringing this up, because this is the one place where I think if I were sitting at the kitchen table with Salinger as he's going over the drafts of this, I might venture to suggest that he change tweak a couple of words, because but he gets a pass because he wrote this in 1952. Right? There's so much kind of collective spiritual wisdom in the zeitgeist that we all can benefit from as we sit here in 2024, largely thanks to pioneers like Salinger and before him, Thoreau and Emily Dickinson, who did not have an easy time of it because they were out there all by themselves.
Yeah.
Being told they were nuts. And without as much, I mean, he was fortunate he was able to connect with Swami Nikhilananda. But we go online, we can, if we can't quite understand the way one teacher is saying something, we just click on another link and get someone else to clarify it for us. Right. So the thing that I think is that I would venture to suggest he change here is this talking about feelings this way, because it's a very common a kind of a classic pitfall on the spiritual path that I think we're all familiar with. We've all probably stepped into this one at times. And Salinger seems to have at least one foot in this pitfall of thinking that emotion is or that feeling is the enemy of awakening.
Oh.
Right.
It's sort of like you can't stop your thoughts and you can't stop
yes. And Perry, you've been connected with me and meditating with me, for a couple of years now. And so you're so familiar with the reality that the eyes perceive colors. That's what they're supposed to do. That's their job. That's there in as part of the 360-degree tapestry of present experience. The seeing sees colors and shapes, hearing hears sounds, thinking perceives thoughts, feeling perceives emotions. They're things that are there. There's nothing wrong with their being there. Trying to repress them doesn't work. Trying to repress them doesn't work. But the other thing that does not work for leading a skillful, happy life is being caught up in the feelings or anything else. And that is really what Salinger, what Teddy is going after here. And we see that from the very beginning with his parents caught up with their toxic emotions. And then what is, the kind of the conventional antidote to that is, poets, and I think of the romantic, I think of Shelley. If you read some Percy Bysshe Shelley, you get some, it's just indulging in all just the ooey gooey sentimental emotions as a way of escaping from all the toxic crap. But it's just the flip side of the same coin. It's just another form of indulgence. Yeah, Elisa? Unmute, please.
Sorry, it's a funny thing because it's sort of like the exquisite day is just today happens right at that moment. There was some beauty to the day.
Yeah.
And it comes and goes. And I'm feeling like, what's the point? I'm having, whatever negative thoughts, they come and go if you let them come and go.
Yeah.
And he kind of grabbed this one pretty hard.
And you know what, Alyssa? They come and go whether or not you, quote unquote, let them come and go.
Right.
We hear that so much. Oh, just let it come, let it go. Even that has a certain amount. I'll get to you in a minute, Kay. Even that, there's a certain amount of presumptuousness to it. Like it's up to us to freaking let them come and let them go. Right? They're going to come and go. The only thing that we can decide is whether we are going to set ourselves up trying to resist the comings and goings, in which case we're going to get trampled by that elephant every time.
Or even identify with them as that's me. Yes. I am that thing.
If we identify them, if we resist them, if we indulge, right, the opposite unskillful ways of dealing with the stuff of life. One is clinging, the other is resistance, right? When we let go of clinging, we let go of resistance, what's left? Being with it and looking around. And then there's a certain beauty to the whole thing that dawns, which is not, Perry, is not a product of emotion. This inherent beauty of existence as it is that dawns, and we look around at it and we say, exquisite day. Yeah, Kay?
I had to leave for a few minutes earlier and I wasn't sure if we had talked about the orange peels.
Yeah, not yet. Thank you. Yeah, we'll get there in a minute. Yeah, that's important.
Because that was just an example of pure perception. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's do that. Let's talk about orange peel.
I just wanted to say, sadly, I'm going to have to leave just in a few minutes, but I've really appreciated this series and taken me back so far in time.
Oh, yeah. It's great.
And the alienation and the cigarettes, it was repulsive to read that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to remember it, but thank you again. I appreciate it.
Oh, you bet. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Yeah, let's talk about orange peels, and let me make sure I don't forget to get back to Teddy's diary entries, because there's some more stuff there I want to talk about. And make sure we walk through all the foreshadowings of Teddy's death. Yeah, so if you're in this edition, it's page 171. Vroom. We have time, Teddy said. Vroom. I love that. That's his. He suddenly thrust his whole head out of the porthole, kept it there a few seconds, then brought it in just long enough to report, someone just dumped a whole garbage can of orange peels out the window. Blah, 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 blah. They float very nicely, he said, without turning around. That's interesting. I don't mean it's interesting that they float, Teddy said. It's interesting that I know about them being there. If I hadn't seen them, then I wouldn't know they were there. And if I didn't know they were there, I wouldn't be able to say that they even exist. That's a very nice, perfect example of the way, and then he gets interrupted once again by a parent. And then near the bottom of the page, some of them are starting to sink now. In a few minutes, the only place they'll still be floating will be inside my mind. That's quite interesting, because if you look at it a certain way, that's where they started floating in the first place. Right? Everything that we know is experience. We don't experience objects. We experience experiences. We infer that there, for purposes of daily life, that there are these things called objects that exist, made out of matter, independent of awareness. But of course, there's no way to ever confirm that, because anything we ever experience happens within our awareness. Right? So all we know is awareness of things. As far as we know, all there is awareness. As far as this whole idea that there's such a thing as a thing called matter, and a universe made out of matter that gives rise to our experiences is totally a matter of faith. It's a total leap of faith. It was first made by Greek philosophers trying to explain where all these experiences come from. That's where they started floating in the first place. If I'd never been standing here at all, or if somebody'd come along and sort of chopped my head off right now while I was, once again, interrupted, there's one of the many foreshadowings of his death. Many of them referring to heads, and actually starting with his head out the porthole, right? Separated from his body. Right. In fact, this is so delicious. Is on page 167 in the middle of the page, where, he's standing on the Gladstone. Teddy was not leaning out of the porthole quite. Here's Salinger having fun with words, with nuances, getting very precious, maybe on the edge of over precious with them. Teddy was not leaning out of the porthole quite so far or so precariously as small boys are apt to lean out of open portholes. Both his feet, in fact, were flat on the surface of the Gladstone, but neither was he just conservatively well tipped. His face was considerably more outside than inside the cabin. Right? His face was considerably more outside than inside the cabin. Right, Laura, you just got this. I just saw your light bulb there. What's going on inside the cabin? Human discourse, human relationships, the regular world, right? In this as in many pockets of the regular world, a lot of toxicity. What's going on outside in the worlds of outside the porthole? The boundless sky and sea, the exquisite day. You know, and from time to time, some orange peels appear and disappear, right? And he's considerably more outside than inside the cabin. That's the whole story of Teddy. He's barely got his feet on the ground. It's like the wonderful image of Shiva Nataraj, you know, the dancing Shiva. He's just barely got 1 foot on the little troll underneath him, which represents the ego, represents our contact, our identification with you know, the so-called real world and with ourself as a physical body. Just barely, right? And we hear this also in Whitman and Song of Myself, right? Both in and out of the game, right? Both in and there's Whitman describing his own, you know, more or less awakened state, both in and out of the game. Let's see if I can hang on. I can't find it now, but he talking about being both in and out of the game, and Teddy's more out than in. By the way, there's one element in this first scene here with his mother. And it's a theory that I have. It's not really important, but it's sort of fun. And for years that I was teaching this stuff, and Salinger was still alive, I had the fantasy of going up and finding him in his little farmhouse in New Hampshire or Vermont, whichever side of the river he was on, I forget, and asking him about this. But there's this emphasis on, you know, the mother's hatred of the father, her deep affection for Teddy, give mother a kiss, a great big sloppy kiss, or however she puts it, and the emphasis on her nude body under the sheet. So here's my theory. You know, in a lot of teachings about rebirth, it's said that since the whole idea, the whole purpose of rebirth is for our spiritual evolution, for us to, you know, get our karma straightened out, get our insight into what life is about straightened out, get awakened, and then graduate from this school, that it's a more efficient system if we don't keep coming back with random strangers, but we come back largely with the same cast of characters, only in different relationships. So like one time you might be the jailer, and there's some prisoner that you've been unkind to, and then the next time around you might be in the roles might switch. You might be literally once again jailer and prisoner, or something resembling that. That's a more efficient way of working things out. And that largely this is supposedly members of your own family. You've been with them before in different relationships. So my theory that I want to ask Salinger about, but now it's too late, is that when we learn that Teddy was a yogi in India making very nice spiritual progress, but then stopped meditating, went off the spiritual path because a lady came along. I think that lady last time is his mom this time. I think there's at least a nice hint of that. The story works very nicely either way, but
Well, there's certainly
I
a
like it.
tension there. There's
Yes.
a tension there, and there's tension in the other stories we've read by him too.
Yeah.
The conversation on the beach with the little girl and banana fish. There's a kind of a squirmy, like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and you see it in, I mean, and for Teddy, it's the discomfort of being in a human body, and of being poured into this 10-year-old human body when really he's this ancient sage. We see it in the description. His hair, he needs a haircut. His t-shirt's got a dime-size hole in it. The shorts are too big for him. Right? He doesn't belong in this 10-year-old body. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit.
Does it add that the mother is wrapped like a mummy and really only her head? He
Interesting.
keeps describing she's sideways, but her head is the other way.
Yeah.
It's like a talking head.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem very sexual, even though it's been suggested that she's nude.
Yeah.
It's not as sexual.
Yeah.
I don't see that. I see it more of she's
Yeah.
the lady, and she's a lady, not a woman, which is,
Yeah. Yeah.
his
Yeah. Well,
language.
Well, that's Teddy's 10-year-old
Yeah.
language. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we talk about his description? Because I don't know if we have time, because I just loved his description of, like, his parents want everybody to be what they want them to be, not to let them be who themselves are. The
Yeah.
whole thing about the apple eaters and all you have to do is throw up, which
Yeah.
is just a great idea.
Isn't it great? Isn't it great? Just vomit out that apple. Yeah. And that idea, yeah, and that the apple is not people so often, they come out of Sunday school thinking that apple is something about sin and something about sex, and it doesn't say that even in the Bible. It's the and it doesn't even say apple, by the way. Never says apple in the Bible. It's the fruit. And in fact, you can find in some Christian painting, it's represented as a pear or a pomegranate or a citron. But it's the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Right? In other words, the tree of the knowledge of duality.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
The right and wrong that sets up every piece of the way we interact.
Yeah.
You're doing it wrong. You look wrong. You are wrong.
Right.
Or
Right.
you're right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that expression of duality, and also in a way, the even more fundamental expression of duality, which is I and you, subject and object, perceiver and perceived. I mean, in awakening, all that artificial distinction falls away. Right? There's just awareness arising in all these waves of, there's just the ocean of awareness arising over here in a Perry wave, and over here in a David wave or a Laura wave, and over here in a Dean wave. And once upon a time, I identified with the Dean wave for some reason that I just can't quite remember anymore. Right? When as it gets clearer and clearer, we're all nothing but ocean. And that's the falling away of duality. So Teddy's trying to walk that back. He's getting back before the swallowing the apple. Vomit out that apple of, as he says, the apple of logic. We can also say the apple of duality. So let me point out quickly how on page after page his death is being foreshadowed. What he really reminds me of very much is, again, Jesus in the Gospels on the way to crucifixion. he hints at it again and again, very broadly hints at it again and again to the apostles, and it goes just right over their heads every time. And we get the sense in the gospel story that Jesus knows he's got this appointment to make. Right? Just as Teddy does. It's the appropriateness of him. If you got no crucifixion, no resurrection, you've got no salvation. Right? Which is in the language of Christian theology, is saying, if we don't have the encounter with the bad stuff, if we don't get pushed into the pool, we don't get the awakening. Right? I mean, every one of us has gotten pushed into the pool one way or another, probably several ways, because we're slow learners. We have to keep getting our heads cracked open. Getting our heads cracked open to open to the light. Right? This is in this book on the bottom of 167, when the father first says, Teddy, God damn it, did you hear me? Teddy turned around at the waist without changing the vigilant position of his feet on the Gladstone. And notice, just pausing right there, throughout the whole thing, we don't have time to do this, but sentence after sentence after sentence, the precise positioning, the precise representation of physical posture.
Yeah.
Right. And not just for its own sake, it's also telling. But you could take, if we had posable action figures for each of these characters, in every moment, every beat of the story, we would know exactly how to pose them.
Yeah.
And there's something, and yet we never feel we're getting hit over the head with it. I just want to point that out. It's so skillful. And it makes the story so vivid, so real. Without changing the vigilant position of his feet on the Gladstone, and gave his father a look of inquiry, whole and pure. I just wanted to point that out. This goes back, Perry, to what you were saying. It's not emotion, it's not repression of emotion. It's a look of inquiry, whole and pure. Oh, what have we here? Right? It's child mind, it's beginner's mind, Buddha mind, Zen mind. To enter into the kingdom of heaven, be like a child, be like Teddy. Just look, oh, what have we here? Uh-huh. Right? At the bottom of 168, you don't have to bother trying to turn all these pages, but I'm just pointing out the places where the death is foretold. You know what I'd like to do, Mr. McCardle said, and he says this to the wife, I'd like to kick your goddamn head open. Once again. Top of 172. Right after Teddy's talking about the orange peels. If I'd never been standing here at all, or if somebody'd come along and sort of chop my head off right while I was, right, there it is again. By the way, it's everyone's got something wrong with their head here. The father is sleeping in this lying in the bed in this extremely uncomfortable position, which Teddy points out in the middle of 173. You can't be very comfortable in that position. It isn't possible, Teddy said. I'll leave it right here. He's trying to give his father a pillow, He's just trying to help his father. I mean, this is the second noble truth, right? Suffering is self-inflicted. There we see it graphically, we see it physically with the father, but we see it, emotionally in, every moment that the parents are on screen. And at the bottom of 173, the last thing that the parents ever hear from their son, After I go out this door, I may only exist in the minds of all my acquaintances. I may be an orange peel.
And then right after the mother asks for the kiss and he says, I'm
Yeah.
tired. And then the sentence, he closed the door behind him. Like,
That's it.
boom.
That's right. He's closed the door. He's left this lifetime. He's left those relationships
Yeah.
behind him. He's just got a little more business to work out with Booper, who, as he points out to Nicholson, she hasn't been a human being for very long, right? And we see all this rage. I hate everyone in this ocean. We see her being so cruel to the little kid, saying, "Oh, you just gotta, you know, have one more parent die, then you'll be an orphan," and just awful.
And that's because she's such a human and she has no enlightenment of any kind. Is that the explanation? She's that cold, unfinished. She's really mean,
She's
but it's
really mean.
because she hasn't
Yeah.
been around enough to learn and
Yeah.
evolve.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really didn't know why she was so nasty.
Yeah. She's just,
This will really change her when she kills her brother.
yeah. Might be the best thing that ever happened to her.
Yeah, blow her head open.
Blow her head open. That's right. That's right. It might be the wake-up call. This is what happens when you're nasty. I mean, it'll be a horrible, horrible way to get the lesson. Deeply, deeply traumatic, of course, but might be she is so dug into her rage and cruelty that she might need some pretty serious dynamite to blow it open. Yeah,
That'd be
good
that.
point. Good point.
What's the symbolism of the camera? What's the point of the camera with no film in it? Why did the
If I
father
may,
wants it back so badly and it's sitting over in a ditch?
so if I may, as a former photographer, this is the pinnacle of photographers.
Oh,
This
the
is
Leica.
pinnacle of
Leica.
cameras, the
Yeah.
pinnacle. The current, like the highest priced digital camera today is probably about $2,000. The Leica today is $12,000.
Wow.
Mhm.
So that's just avaricious or materialism. I want that camera back.
It's yeah,
It's
and
value.
it's just there's a reference to the Queen Mary too. This is like this striving for I am somebody because I have a Leica.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, David, go online into the archives of the New Yorker while you're looking for that Hapworth 16 story, or Hapworth 15, and there's an article about maybe a dozen or so years ago by Anthony Lane about the Leica, and it is, I mean, you can't read this article and not be willing to mortgage your house and go out and buy a Leica.
I come close, actually.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you'll be convinced that if you could only own a Leica, you would become, Henri Cartier-Bresson or
which,
something.
which is what their marketing is too, but that's a
Yeah.
separate story.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You said to
Okay.
remind you about his diary entries.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we should go there because we're almost out of time here. Yep. So in my book on 180, there's this long entry, answer Professor Mandel's letter, blah, blah, blah. And then he starts talking about why Teddy is sick of poetry. A man walks along the beach and unfortunately gets hit in the head by a coconut. His head unfortunately cracks open in two halves. There we go again. Then his wife comes along the beach singing a song and sees the two halves and recognizes them and picks them up. She gets very sad, of course, and cries heartbreakingly. That is exactly where I am tired of poetry. Supposing the lady just picks up the two halves and shouts into them very angrily, "Stop that!" Right? Yes, it is. It's very funny, but it also shows us another way of approaching. Stop that. Stop indulging. Stop indulging in suffering. Stop. We don't have to all go along with that Okay, and then he has a list of words to look up, starting at the bottom of 180. Words and expressions to look up in library tomorrow when you return the books. Nephritis, because someone there had nephritis. Myriad, gift horse, cunning, triumvirate. Okay, now this phrase gift horse, we only ever hear that phrase in one traditional expression: never look a gift horse in the mouth, which refers to the fact that normally if you're bargaining to buy a horse, you look in its mouth because the condition of its teeth and its gums tell you how old it is and how healthy or sick it is. But when someone gives you a horse, you see what bad manners it would be to look the gift horse in the mouth. And then evidently he looks it up and he learns about that expression, because then at the near the bottom of 181, he writes this incredibly beautiful thing: life is a gift horse, in my opinion. Oh, that's going to be my tattoo. Life is a gift horse, in my opinion. In my opinion, to make it a little bit modest. But man, right? How much time and energy and wailing and gnashing of teeth do people devote to looking the gift horse of life in the mouth
And trying to change everything.
and trying to
And trying
change
to
everything?
alter it and trying to argue it. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you stop looking it in the mouth, then you see that it's an exquisite day. Yeah, Nancy?
Well, one thing I'm just confused about is that this reference to the Lydecker group and this group of professors questioning him
Yeah.
in Edinburgh and all this. I mean, how did he end up getting to the attention of these people to be grilled about his like spiritual experiences? It sounds like that was what was happening. Did his mom lead that charge, or what happened there?
We don't know exactly. Evidently Salinger decided it's not that important one way or another. Maybe it was, when his teachers at school noticed that he was a little genius, and people, interested in doing research on geniuses. Once they started talking to him, they found out, wait a minute, there's a lot more than just genius going on here. Something like that, I would guess.
Yeah, thanks.
Somehow the cat gets out of the bag. Yeah. Okay.
This isn't the first character that Salinger's written about being brilliant, especially as children.
Yeah.
All of the Glass children are off the charts. They're all on win money on some program or something.
Yes, they're all, and we get more about this in the next Franny and Zooey and Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenters and Seymour in Introduction. They were all contestants on the radio quiz show It's a Wise Child. Right? Which by the way,
Salinger did?
I'm sorry?
Is it something Salinger did in his young life, or is it a made-up
No.
thing of these special children that are...
It's a made-up thing, but I want to point out, we're about to run out of time here, but I want to point out that like everything Salinger does, it's clever, it's playful, and it's got a spiritual flip side. So It's a Wise Child makes sense on the face of it as a quiz show with brilliant children. It's a line lifted from a poem by, I think it's from Wordsworth. It's a wise child that knows its own father. Oh, the true wisdom is to know the Father, capital F, to know our source, to know God. And as we find out in the rest of the stories, this winds up being what the Glass children are all about. Getting beyond just being, okay, great, I can do algebra or, translate Greek, but I can wake up and on a good day, maybe help other people to wake up. So, my friends, this has been so delightful. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you so much, Natural Dharma Foundation, for making this possible. May it ever be thus. May we always have opportunities to jump into this sandbox of Dharma and sandbox of literature and music and art and play around. And so I'll see you around for the next thing, whatever that is.
Thanks, Dean.
Thanks.
What a gift horse.
Gift horse.